Well, let's now speak to Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of Politics First, joining us live here on RT International. Great to see you today, Marcus. Thanks for coming on. Moscow has already called this report politically motivated and untransparent. What do you make of that? Do you think there's any political play going on?
I believe the report is uncorroborated, circumstantial nonsense. First of all, and I quote, probably Mr. Putin and the Russian government were responsible for the terrible killing of Mr. Litvinenko in 2006. I quote, probably. What court of law in the world, in particular in England, would convict someone of a criminal activity on the basis of them being probably responsible? That's absolute nonsense, and it should be dismissed for that reason in particular. And also as well, the whole report was prejudiced from the outset. Ever since the killing of Mr. Litvinenko nearly 10 years ago, the British media and British politicians had made up their mind that Mr. Putin and the Russian government were responsible, like how they made up their minds 1 hour after the Malaysian air crash in eastern Ukraine nearly 2 years ago. The Russian government was responsible. In 2006, British media and British politicians decided that Mr. Putin and the Russian government were responsible. So it was always going to influence, to a large extent, any inquiry into the killing. And so the impartiality of the findings of this report have to be severely questioned.
Well, the decision to open a public inquiry into Litvinenko's murder was made, as you were suggesting there, when the relations between Moscow and London were deeply strained. I mean, you mentioned MH17 being down in Ukraine. Of course, a lot of the media said Vladimir Putin personally shot down MH17. Of course, all of Russia invaded Ukraine as well. Do you make any more of the timing here? It does seem to some that there are some political advantages to take right now.
Well, there definitely are political advantages for Britain and for the West in general, because here can be another horrendous act which can be blamed on Russia. And let's be clear, the killing of Mr. Litvinenko, it was appalling, but it is very unclear as to who was responsible for it. And quite frankly, Mr. Litvinenko had a very dubious background. You know, the world of espionage is very shadowy, very murky and very dangerous. And that's all the more pronounced when you have someone who's a double agent. And Mr. Litvinenko was a double agent. He was working for more than one foreign intelligence agency. So it is very probable that any intelligence agency or even organised crime could have been responsible for his death. But certainly there's political gain for Britain and for the West in blaming Russia. But then anyone who's familiar with British-Russian relations will understand that ever since diplomatic relations were established between London and Moscow in the 1500s, there's always been mutual distrust, mutual suspicion, mutual hostility between the two. And so what's happened today with the findings of the report is just another part of that history. But I believe, give it time, it will be forgotten, and it will just be another negative aspect to British-Russian relations.
Well, it's interesting you bring in the historical aspect. Vladimir Putin said some months ago, look, Russia's the biggest country in the world. There's always somebody who's attacking Russia in this day and age. It's been going on, as you say, for absolutely centuries. Litvinenko's widow has called on the UK to expel all Russian intelligence agents from the country. Will there be any response along those lines from the British government, do you think?
Well, I think there's a division at the moment within Whitehall. The Foreign Office is very, very cautious about placing additional sanctions on Russia because the sanctions at the moment are having a serious impact on British industry, but also Britain and the West in general needs Russia in regard to Iran, in regard to Syria, in regard to Afghanistan. However, there are some people in Downing Street that would like to place additional sanctions on Russia. But, you know, let's talk about this inquiry seeing the bigger picture. How much has it cost the British taxpayer? I would like to see the exact amount, because I suspect it will run into a great amount of money. And what for? Political gain. If we're going to have an inquiry about the dubious activities of foreign intelligence services, let's talk about MI6, Britain's foreign intelligence service, officially known as SIS. It's very well documented that MI6, SIS, tried to kill Slobodan Milosevic and Muammar Gaddafi. They were the leaders of independent sovereign countries. That's completely against the UN Charter, completely against international law. So perhaps there should be a British official inquiry into the behaviour of MI6 abroad. I think a lot of British people would like to know where their taxpayers' money is being spent, i.e. trying to kill foreign leaders of independent sovereign countries.
Well, that's certainly opening up a big can of worms there when you talk about the clandestine operations of intelligence agencies all around the world. Do you think after this investigation is published today saying the upper echelons of the Kremlin are responsible for the killing of Alexander Litvinenko, do you think Vladimir Putin needs to step up front, face the music, go to the camera and speak to the world and make a statement or not?
No, I don't believe he would. I think that undoubtedly people in the Kremlin will read the findings of the report. There may be a statement rejecting the findings, but let's just be clear about it. You know, the Russian government has many challenges to deal with at home and abroad. It's a serious government, and they're not going to waste time on a report which says probably, and I quote, probably the president of the Russian Federation and the Russian government were responsible for a murder. You know, let's not pay too much attention to a report which uses the word probably. The British media and British politicians, they're going to have a carnival over it, but that's expected. In foreign affairs context, British media is one of the worst in the world. But, you know, the Russian government, it's business as usual for them. They've got challenges at home, challenges abroad they have to deal with, and quite frankly, a report which is projected as being serious and thorough, but concludes probably Mr. Putin was responsible for the killing of Litvinenko, should just be dismissed, because no court of law in the world would use that sort of word and then convict someone of a criminal activity.
All right, Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of Politics First. A great pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining us on RT International.